Graham.
Here.
Hipskin.
Here.
York.
Here.
Levin.
Here.
Healy.
Here.
Morley.
Here.
Kennedy.
Here.
Mulliner, absent. Wagner.
Here.
12 present, 2 absent.
12 present, 2 absent. We have an official quorum. Before I go on to item number 2, and we will actually move up some folks on item 2, namely the museum, to the first position so that we can see you guys onward as quickly as possible. Before we go on to item number 2, I would just like to kind of set the expectations of tonight, if at all possible. Tonight's goal, I think, is to go through these circle back items and basically give City Attorney Storino a direction as to establish an ordinance for the following council meeting to approve. So that's our expectations. We are determining fences. We don't have to spend the fence. These are maximums that we would go to. So let's keep that in mind. We can make a lot of these. There's second bites at the apple later on during the year. So again, keep that in mind as well too. So whatever decision we make tonight, or actually when we actually approve the ordinance, can also change with that second bite at the apple. So again, determining fences. City Manager Borchard.
That's well stated, Mr. Mayor. From a staff perspective, I think we were at circle back items, and be prepared to jump in as you would so request as to which circle back items you'd like to discuss first.
Okay. Let's start off with the museum so we can get them on their way. And I know we kind of have a little bit of a different format where we would normally invite you up. City Manager Borchard, would you like to just maybe have them give a quick little...
My recollection, there was a request to circle back by Alderman Healy. 2 issues. Alderman Healy speaks very well for himself, but my understanding was that the budget as requested was not an issue. It was going forward. Perhaps there should be a maximum amount that would best serve the community going forward for all to know and all to understand. And some additional information was requested. Mr. Berghager has provided some summary material and information as to how museums are traditionally funded, and a little bit of the pros and cons of museums. For background work, the foundation board members are here tonight. They made it clear they wish to provide advisory support and assistance for the council tonight if necessary, and/or would certainly come back to a committee meeting later if that would be the council's preference. But staff is here and the foundation members are here to support the council's deliberations and discussions as appropriate.
Okay. Questions, discussion? Okay. All right. So we're pretty much going forward as is. Circle backs covered. Alderman Healy.
Correct. I have nothing to further to add other than to make sure that the one budgeted item of rent was adjusted, which I think staff made appropriate marks last week. And as long as that's the case, then I have nothing further.
Okay. Any other discussions or points? I know last meeting we kind of left off. Some people felt they didn't have, the ability to speak on behalf of the museum. So if anybody would like to do that at this point. I know the meeting prior, many people advocated on behalf of the museum. So if you feel you've already done that, that's fine. If there's anybody else that would like to speak up, this is the time to do that. So, anybody? Okay. So, up. City Manager Borchard.
Just to be clear, with the council, typically the budget's the budget. That's the fence, as I've said, you've said, others have said. We try not to spend to the fence. What we don't spend is not dollars spent and will be added to the fund balance at the end of that year. Alderman Healy made a comment of we do have now a contract extension for the lease for the storage facility that is less than what was budgeted. Did I hear correctly? You'd like that line item changed and then the contribution to fund balance modified appropriately?
Correct.
Okay, so noted. We will do that.
Very good. Very good. Well, I would like to say something, and I think on behalf of me, and I think a lot of us up here at the council, I think Elmhurst is a very unique town that is rich in culture and history. We value the museum. It is a department of the city. It is something I will support as the mayor, and I know a lot of the aldermen up here will as well. Privatizing is a whole other issue, but we many cities do have museums, and they are run by the city. Chicago does their own museum. Naperville has their own as well too. So I think we are very unique and blessed. We have one of the only, actually the only one-room schoolhouse on its site that was actually built when Abraham Lincoln was a congressman. So I give a little history on that. I think that's pretty impressive. Our budget is getting better, and there were times where it was very tough, and we had to make some concessions. If it comes to a policeman over a museum, there's no doubt we're going to fund a policeman. But I think the unique thing about Elmhurst is that we look at the whole picture and look at the whole Elmhurst as a whole, and that's a town that supports a variety of things and rich in history and culture. So I just wanted to let the museum folks know that you have a mayor that's very supportive and very, very happy with what you're doing, and look forward to the many things that you're going to do in the future. So, anybody else? Questions, discussion? Museum? We're good? Okay. You guys are all good. Thank you. City Manager Borchert, next.
I think we went back up to the top then. The assistant city manager issue was resolved. I believe the next item was resolved relative to questions about full-time employees and contract employees, and perhaps then we're on to the circle back relative to the assistant zoning administrator position. This was a proposal to provide a support for the zoning administration and planning area of the city. It is proposed to be a full-time position, but a full-time position that would be only at 6 months for the fiscal year 11-12, meaning the plan, action plan, if the budget would be approved, is we would work with the Development Planning and Zoning Committee as to their oversight relative to the planning and zoning and economic development operation, and review the job description for the assistant zoning administrator. With that checked off, there would be a search and ideally a appointment that would take place no sooner than mid-fiscal year to allow this position to be filled, and allow Mr. Warner to have a support individual and provide that background for the Zoning and Planning Commission, the committee, and the community going forward.
Okay, any questions or discussions? Alderman Pezza?
Just a quick, I'm sorry if I missed it. How long has that position been dark, or whatever we call it?
I think that the darkness began maybe 4 years ago.
Okay.
Darkness meaning as positions were vacated, they were left vacated, and we've been operating without those positions, and in many cases been able to make, I think, a very successful transition to specialists in the areas of various areas of consulting services. But there is an ongoing need for administrative support for the commission, the committee, the council on general ongoing planning and zoning matters, which is what this position would support.
Okay. Alderman Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, when this was asked to be reviewed, that's when I called up about the consultant fees, number 3012, and I wanted to be part of that. I don't want to discuss that separately. I asked for the contracts because I wanted to see what duties the consultants performed, and one of them does work in the zoning and building department, and their contract does end at 2012. I would like to know what different functions would the zoning administrator be doing compared to what the consultant is doing for us already?
City Manager Borchert.
Yes, I'll try to help with that. Alderman Shea has pointed out the other circle back would be the second from the bottom
Right.
category area. There are 3 contracts that have application for economic development. And those are the Feinzoll Community Marketing Contract. That contract actually will be placed subject to the committee's approval on a committee agenda for next Monday night. That contract ends the end of the fiscal year. That contract is mostly involved in marketing the overall community retailing areas, certainly the central business district, but also citywide, and in assisting in the use of new social media, the internet for marketing businesses in a general fashion, allowing those opportunities to be then picked up on by the individual businesses in the community. The Van Slyke contract is much more into the industrial area and in a support position for the redevelopment plans and projects of the three TIF districts. It does spend a lot of his time on developing the answers to inquiries and making connections from businesses that are looking to invest in the community as to the opportunities that are available in the Elmhurst community. The third contract is with the Bartels firm. He's got 3 areas of consulting. One is as the development of funds, raising funds for the Heritage Foundation. There was a full-time position, development director, that was removed from the budget. There's a major effort by the Heritage Foundation board to raise funds, raise volunteer support, and raise the public relations awareness of the museum within the community. And Mr. Bartels serves as the advisor and coach, if you will, and assists Mr. Berghager in working with that foundation board with their fundraising. He also serves all of the city staff with public relations and drafting of press releases if necessary from time to time, and advising in that arena. There really isn't, with the 3 consultants, any support for the zoning administration area.
Because the only one I was really concerned with, I wanted to see if any of them worked in the zoning department, and if they did, I thought it looked like Mr. Van Slyke was doing a lot of work for what it looked like, and I just wanted to know if he would be doing overlapping work compared to the assistant zoning administrator, or they would have totally different duties. So it sounds like they have totally different duties.
Totally different.
Yeah.
Okay, because otherwise, I was going to say, if they had overlapped or if they had some of the same duties, his contract doesn't end till 2012, so I was going to say hold off. But if it's totally different.
The thing to keep in mind too is we 2 years ago we changed, we relieved the director and an assistant, so we got rid of 2, and now we're looking just to bring an assistant in. It looks like, from what I could see, roughly $50,000, $60,000 to give Dan a hand, because things are starting to turn and starting to get busier down there. So we're not bringing another director on; we're just bringing in a rank and file person to give a hand. Would that be correct, Mr. Borcher?
That's correct.
Okay, just so we're not going crazy with a very expensive person that would be considered management. We're actually putting a around that's going to do the.
If we ever go crazy, we bring in David Hahn.
Right. So, Alderman Pezza.
Thank you, Mayor. Question on the memo we received regarding Alderman Shea's request. It says 49.5 Van Slyke, 49.5 Bartels, 15 Feinzoll. I know these aren't, the Van Slyke and Bartels are about half, the Feinzoll's about a third. Where else is their salary coming out of to make up for those differences?
Perhaps there was a memorandum that explained The assistant city manager plan that was in the budget, your action removed that and took those dollars and put it into the fund balance. If you look at that as an example, the assistant city manager was in many different funds appropriately. Similarly, the three contractors' expenditures will be charged appropriately to the TIF districts and to the general fund. We could provide a detail of all of those account codes if you'd like.
Okay, just because follow-up, I know on the fines all, normally on the invoices, it seems at least half to two-thirds ends up out of the general fund and then the rest out of one, two, or three of the TIFs. So I was confused because it was such a low amount from that one department. So I guess, are we expecting it to be less out of the planning and zoning and more out of TIF in the future?
I don't think we're making any changes, so it's been the past practice would carry going forward.
So it would be more than...
And I would offer, we would, as Mayor DeCiani suggested, we're trying to get answers to any questions tonight, direction then to the attorney for the ordinance for 2 weeks from tonight. We will provide the detail of those three consultants relative to where their time is charged in a packet for you on Thursday. That won't be hard to do.
Great.
It might be easier than trying to struggle through tonight. We'll just do the memo for you for Thursday.
Very good. Okay, so we've got the assistant in zoning checked off, and we've got consulting fees checked off as far as circle backs. Building improvements, requested by Alderman Kennedy.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Chairman?
Thank you. The reason I wanted to circle back on this one is because I'm part of the group, along with the city manager, that meets regularly with the school board and with the folks in the Park District. And one of the items that we've begun, just very basic discussions, is the potential of perhaps entering into a common space where all three government entities would reside, and ultimately being able to have the benefits of, having one building, one meeting space, and improvements in efficiency because of the reductions thereof. So what I would like to do is not to eliminate this, but if we can, push this back until next year so that we have this coming year to see if there's any real legs behind this movement. And as long as we're not spending a tremendous amount of money to maintain the roof for this year, at least gives us a year to evaluate this idea so that we're not potentially putting in a large capital expenditure into a building that we may ultimately want to vacate at some point in the future.
Okay. City Manager Borchert.
In that regard, I would anticipate that any collaboration is good and potentially going to be productive, but before the goal would be achieved, the roof will need to be fixed. So I would suggest we allow the dollars to stay in the budget, and we'll hear more from, that joint committee will hear more as we go forward, and we could certainly commit from a staff perspective to not go forward on any roof repairs till that would be reviewed, that notion would be reviewed with the Public Works and Buildings Committee, and allow for that collaboration of discussion about a potential collaboration of facilities down the road. Put that in a timeline, understand the roof condition. I'm not completely aware of the roof condition other than it's in the budget for repairs, knowing that staff has been generally asked, let's not put anything in the budget that could be pushed. There is some sentiment that this repair needs to be done, stitch in time to save 9 later. So I would ask that the fence be allowed to include this, but we'll put a circle back on it and work with the committee and the council going forward.
I'm okay with that.
Fair enough.
Yep.
Fair enough. Very good, Chairman. Thank you, City Manager. And on the next item, which is request by Alderman Brown for sidewalk improvements. Alderman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This line item, even though it speaks directly to sidewalk improvements, it was one of the various items that I had concerns about of the capital expenditure budget. I'm looking at the capital expenditure budget, page 9 in this year's budget, if you have it before you. And my concern is this, and I think I voiced it when we talked about it originally. The new sidewalk installation program has just gotten kick-started, has had a lot of discussion over the last few years. And last year, we had no allocation of funds for this program. This year, what is currently proposed is additionally no allocation of funds. And primarily, this is a north side of town concern. And when I looked at this year's budget in the capital expenditures area, on again CEB-9, and I look at line item, well, it says page 28, sidewalk cost sharing program. What is proposed in our capital expenditure budget is $150,000 for this line item. What was proposed for the same fiscal year last year was $50,000 in this line item. So we're accelerating a sidewalk, or what is proposed is to accelerate the sidewalk cost sharing program, tripling it in this fiscal year, but a program that is focused on the north side, and I will be as bold to say is this is not a north side capital budget that is friendly to the north side at all. We're proposing tripling the cost sharing, but again, for a second consecutive year, not allocating any funds to the new sidewalk program. Along those same lines, we continue to do asphalt patching. We continue to do resurfacing of asphalt streets. Again, primarily a north side capital expenditure. But again, I believe this is the second year in a row as well. There is no monies allocated to concrete street reconstruction, which is typically a $300,000 expenditure. And I won't reference exactly the expenditure that is proposed for the asphalt due to the fact that it's the majority of the city. So my concern is twofold. For sidewalks, for the new sidewalk program, for a second consecutive year, it is proposed to put this program on halt. Alongside that, the sidewalk cost sharing program is being proposed to be triple the funds for that program. Asphalt streets, reconstruction and patching, or resurfacing and patching, monies are currently allocated for both, but for concrete street reconstruction, there are, again, for a second straight year, there's no monies allocated for reconstruction of 40-year-old concrete streets in the north side of town. One of the other capital expenditure items that has been delayed for approximately 5 years, the intersection of North York and Grand Avenue. No money's allocated for that at all. I am not for this, the state of this current capital expenditure budget. I am not for this budget at all. I have strongly made these same comments in previous years. This year I am posed to take my stance in regards to this budget unless allocations are provided for some of these north side projects or north side expenditures. My final thought on this is I would like to propose to restate the sidewalk cost sharing program back down to what was proposed in last year's fiscal budget from $150,000 to $50,000, and to add monies to both the new sidewalk installation program as well as the concrete street reconstruction program.
Okay, Alderman. Real quick, City Manager Borchert, from what we had discussed, I think most of those concrete streets that are up there that are due for replacement, we've got the 5-year rotation. We've got a lot of streets up on the north end that are going to get redone or are on the schedule for this year. Those concrete streets will be ground down and replaced with asphalt. Is that correct, or what? I just want to double check so we're not kind of talking apples to apples. City Manager Borchert?
That is correct. There is a study that was completed of that northeast Elmhurst concrete streets. My understanding is the street superintendent that reports to the Public Works Director reviews those concrete streets on an annual basis. There is, I think, one long stretch scheduled for some work with grinding and paving. So it's part of the asphalt paving program. It's a concrete street, but the plan would be to grind it and then add asphalt over it. Not unlike what was done with York Street itself from Grand Avenue South, and with the Palmer Drive underpass. They were concrete streets, but in St. Charles Road last year, the concrete surface is ground and an asphalt overlay put over the top. One of the streets in northeast Elmhurst is to be treated that way this coming season, and other streets are scheduled beyond. From a budget perspective, the budget was prepared understanding or suggesting that the budget plan should provide for proper maintenance of the sidewalks where there are sidewalks, where we have potential tripping locations, liability issues. We see trips and falls. Sometimes then there's simply repair, and other times there's litigation and liability. Felt that was appropriate as the funds were coming back to the city to reestablish a full support towards the sidewalks that where the adjacent private property owner would be willing to pay a 50-50 cost sharing for the replacement of those deteriorated squares to avoid that liability going forward. So that is why dollars were reestablished first for the maintenance, and over time the plan was to reestablish funds for new sidewalks, and also frankly allow time for the committee and the council to consider the new policy that has been asked for relative to policy for sidewalks going forward. At least that's the rationale as to why dollars were reestablished in maintenance but not in new construction.
So we're doing streets up there. Sidewalks that need to be replaced will be replaced. We've got dollars in there for that, correct? The only where we're lacking would be if maybe a block wants to petition for a sidewalk. There's no dollars in that bucket, correct?
At the moment, again, there was a thought that there would really, although a couple of streets had started the process of petition drives, they've been stopped as we wait for direction from the council going forward, both on policy and financing. The thought would be that we need a policy first, and then any funding would be probably out of the 12-13 fiscal year to allow the policy planning to go forward, the planning of any special service area to go forward. Then the construction would be not this coming construction season, but the next construction season.
Very good. That makes sense. And you know, Alderman, I applaud you. I'm a North Side guy, and I'm all for, you know, helping the North Side. But I also, you know, oftentimes we talk about here about, you know, dollars, but many of the aldermen stood up and voted for the dollars too, and actually voted for the levy.
I'm sorry?
I said that you didn't vote for the levy. Many of the aldermen did. So when you talk about dollars for the North Side, keep in mind when we vote for the levy, we vote for the dollars. You know, keep that in mind, because I think it's important to vote for the money so you could spend it. And when you don't vote for the money, it's tough to kind of get up here and say we should do this, this, and this, and those are things that I think we need to keep in mind. So, Alderman Shea.
I don't think it's fair to tell Alderman Bram that his, you know, if he doesn't vote for tax increases, his ward isn't going to get anything.
No, absolutely not. That's why I said we're getting the allocations. The streets are going to get done. It's just, you know, sometimes people grandstand, but then when it comes to money, it's not there. And I apologize if I offended you, but it's important that we vote for both, because then we've got the dollars to do that.
But that doesn't mean, you know, the argument before could have been like, there could have been maybe more cutbacks or things like that. It's just, I don't think you can associate the two together, that he was not going to get it for his second ward if he doesn't vote for tax increases. It just doesn't sound.
Alderman Pezza.
Thank you. I don't live in the third ward. I don't represent only the third ward. And I didn't vote for the tax increase, so hopefully I'm okay.
No, it's,
But I would like to comment, I guess if I understand Alderman Bram correctly, the sidewalk cost sharing program for 150, to take that down to 50. I guess my concern putting part of that extra 100,000 or moving it into the new installation 50/50 program would be, Alderman Leader and I submitted a referral that was not yet looked at to decide so we don't have another Gladys Street ordeal.
That's right.
I think we should first promote taking care of that before we commit to doing any more of the 50/50. That's my personal opinion. But I can understand contributing to something to that concrete street. I know, I don't know how much, but I could support that. I don't think I could support the 50/50 without our referral being looked at and revised.
Alderman Gutenkopf.
Yeah, I have a question relating to the 50/50 program. Because I know that there are isolated houses with no sidewalk, and the sidewalk ends in front of that person's property. If there's no money in the 50/50 program, does that mean that a resident who may want to install a sidewalk in front of their house to connect existing sidewalks is not eligible? There's no funding, so they couldn't get that done this year. Is that correct?
City Manager Borchert.
It's been past practice for the short links that are missing. Typically, there's a north-south sidewalk and not a east-west connecting sidewalk. There's a council policy that it's typically then a side yard, not the front yard, for that side yard, I forgot exactly what the funding ratio was. The committee report approved by the council, that's now a policy that is followed by city staff, provides that cost sharing between the city and the adjacent private property owner. If the private property owner can raise those private property dollars to make the connecting sidewalk link, the city provides its dollars. Because it's a one-year project, it's paid for all in 1 year. It comes out of the sidewalk cost share program with dollars all raised from the private side, like the 50/50 program, except I think it's more like 1/3, 2/3. And that's where the dollars, this is the line in the budget that allows that program to go forward. Alderman Bram's concern is relative to a new improvement that involves the need for financing in a special service area. That area of the budget does not have dollars available fiscal year 11-12, but I think the dollars show up in fiscal year 12-13.
Can I have a follow-up? I'm still not sure I understand your question. So this is a different budget line than would be used should a resident want to complete the connection of a sidewalk in front of their house.
No, this would fund that.
So it's not this budget line. So if there's no money in this budget line and a resident came to us and said, I want to connect the two pieces of sidewalk across my front yard where there's no sidewalk, there's money for that? Yes. Okay, thank you.
Alderman Leader.
Alderman Pez is correct. We have made a recommendation to Alderman Kennedy's committee regarding sidewalks after the Gladys Avenue Civil War. And frankly, I think it's premature to discuss sidewalks until Alderman Kennedy's committee has acted, because clearly there may very well be significant changes. Also, regarding the north side, with all due respects, in the second ward, I would say that in terms of streets and street repair, that Mr. Borchard has been very forthcoming. Mr. Hughes has been very forthcoming. And every time myself or Alderman Shea have proposed new streets, street repairs, the city has done everything in their power and has acted very positively in the second ward. Now, I cannot speak for the third ward, and I don't mean to speak for the third ward, but I think we have to be careful when we say the north side, because the second ward is also in the north side. In fact, we just got a brand-new street on Gladys. But again, I don't want to move on sidewalks until we have a resolution of this whole issue. I believe it is premature.
Thank you, Alderman. Thank you. Alderman Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate Alderman Bram's comments to wanting to get more sidewalks in his area, because I think sidewalks ultimately are a good thing. I will say that I believe our process is fundamentally broken, and that's one of the things that the Public Works Committee needs to figure out a better way to administer the idea of putting sidewalks in places where they don't currently exist. The cost-sharing program, as it states today, has $150,000 in it going forward, and I respect what city staff has done, because they've said they've looked at the state of our sidewalks, and they're saying that's how much we need to invest to replace those areas that are deteriorated, so that we do end up in a situation where there's a minimal chance of litigation based on somebody tripping and falling in those areas. So I'm not in favor of moving money into the new sidewalk installation, because, again, we need to get this policy, this approach right. I don't know, I think everybody here got copied on the Wall Street Journal article a couple weeks ago that shows we are not alone in this endeavor of putting in sidewalks and how it should be done, or maybe how it shouldn't be done. And so we need to have an approach that works best for us, and then I think when we've had that conversation and that agreement, we'll be at that point as to funding that in the future years. So I'm in favor of doing sidewalks. I think we need to get our house in order from a policy standpoint, and then move forward in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Anybody else? Alderman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In regards to a few of the points, the study that was done was approximately been done about 5 years ago. It's a 3-inch manual. I spoke to this issue when we first addressed the capital expenditure budget. I learned tonight that one of the streets is planned to be resurfaced in the northeast, not the second ward, but the third ward, this fiscal year. Until tonight, I wasn't aware of that. I actually do have concerns over that. The reason being is that in that 3-inch report that I'm more than happy to share with anybody who cares to doze off frequently trying to read it, is that a lot of the streets in there were marked, there's 3 criteria from good, fair to poor. A lot of the streets were marked as poor 5 years ago. A lot of the streets were marked as fair 5 years ago. There were a decent amount of streets marked as good. If the subbase of the concrete streets is not substantial today, then why would the curb and gutter, which is a monolithic, which is all one piece, from the curb and gutter into the street, it's all 40 years old, why would the curb and gutter be good if the streets are not good? So if we're just grinding down the concrete and replacing it with asphalt, as the curb and gutters continue to deteriorate and we continue to have stagnant water in various areas, I don't know if this is the ultimate solution to the problem, or if it is just a Band-Aid which would incur greater costs down the line. My point this evening is not grandstanding in any way, shape, or form. I have brought this up over the last 5 years. Any vote that I place, no matter what it is, should not be held over my head when it comes to any shape of improvement or need of the third ward. In regards to my previous vote, since that was touched on already, I made many motions to make a compromise on the motor fuel tax as well as the tax rate increase. I have been the one who made these compromises, and they have not been accepted. So I tried to meet the council in the middle. I have never stated that I wasn't for a tax rate increase. I thought it was necessary. I didn't think to the degree that we did it over the last 2 years was a necessity. But if my previous votes on a tax rate increase or motor fuel tax increase is hampering Third Ward residents. I have great concern over that. Great concern. This is not the first budget, and I am not grandstanding, that the Third Ward, the north side of town, has not seen improvements. Something that has been passed by the City Council, the improvements of York and Grand, which the other side of York and Grand in Bensonville is better and safer than the Elmhurst side, which is the entrance to the city of Elmhurst. It has been passed by the City Council, but it is still, 5 years later, has not been acted on. And I understand the economic environment, so I have not said anything other than last year and now this year. So I am going to wrap up my summary here, is that this budget does not have what I deem to be the necessary capital improvements for the Third Ward, and I believe also, in some cases, would increase the Second Ward. I have no further comments other than I would like to see this revised. I would like to see monies allocated to the new sidewalk program. The policy has been under debate for about a year, if not more. There is no discussion of the policy prior to. The policy was in place, I think, 2 to 3 years prior than that. We do have a policy. So if we deem it necessary to revise that policy, that's ultimately the decision of the full City Council. But there is a city policy in place. No further comments.
Alderman Pezza.
Thank you. I have a question. I'm not sure if Mr. Borchert or Mr. Hughes may be able to answer. As long as we're talking about this, let's hypothetically say we decided to take line 28 from 150 down to 50, which left another $100,000. What would $100,000 do for us street repair-wise under line 30, the concrete street reconstruction? Like what exactly would that do? How many streets would that fix? What could happen with that amount of money?
I think as Alderman Bram has even alluded to, it all depends on the street. Is the curb acceptable? Can the curb be left? Does the curb have to be removed and replaced? $100,000 relative to a concrete street rehabilitation does not probably even do a 600-foot stretch. Mr. Hughes, I'm
Okay, thank you.
Would you be able to add, Mr. Hirakawa, I think, is, again...
Mr. Hughes, can you repeat that again? What did you say, what was it,
Yeah.
for 100,000, if we ground in asphalt, was it?
Generally speaking, on our asphalt streets, we consider about $50,000 a block, very roughly, because blocks vary in size. But if you're going to use block as your increment, you're probably about $50,000. That's more costly to grind concrete streets. The current plan up there is that when the $300,000 comes back in the budget, which is the concrete street rehabilitation program, some portion of that will go towards those grind and overlays of the Northeast Elmhurst, but the budget just hasn't had the money in it for the last 2 or 3 years. So that's kind of the tentative plan right now. So.
Very good.
Did I misspeak? I thought Mr. Hirakawa said there was some serious work on a block for this summer. Did I misspeak?
Not in Northeast Elmhurst, other than West Avenue is being reconstructed, but that's not city fund. I mean, it's mostly federal funding on that one.
I think it's good that we get my misspeak corrected. If I thought Mr. Hirakawa had a section identified for this summer. If that's next summer, I apologize.
I believe it's
But
next
would
summer.
report that the Public Works team does evaluate concrete streets north and south. There's a lot of concrete streets south of Madison on the east end of the community. It truly is not a north-south situation. other than the elected officials for election purposes, there's no ward maps that identify wards or areas relative to schedules of maintenance. It's all based on condition of the street and the need of the street. Ideally, again, as mentioned with the roof, the stitch in time to save 9 stitches later is the policy with a lot of the appropriate asphalt and concrete technical features being applied to the maintenance schedule.
Before I move on to Alderman Gutenhoff.
Apologize for misspeaking. I thought there was one, but apparently that stretches for next year.
I want everybody to keep in mind, you know, as the year progresses, the policy gets changed and approved, and, you know, these are fences, but they could be maneuvered. We maneuvered dollars for stormwater last year. So keep that in mind, and then we'll further discussion, and we'll try to get an idea of where the council stands and get this moved on. So, Alderman Gutenhoff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually have a couple of thoughts about this. It sounds like, and I've heard Alderman Bram talk about the concrete streets in his ward now for several years, and I am concerned that perhaps they're not getting the kind of attention, but I hear underlying this sort of a philosophical difference between what kind of road surface we should be looking at, and part of what I hear is that we're planning to replace concrete streets with an asphalt upper surface, which from the very little I know about streets has an implication for the longevity and the kind of material that we're using. And it seems to me that that's a discussion that perhaps we might not be having now, that's a committee level issue that we should be addressing. Concrete streets have a very long lifespan and use less fossil fuel or fossil-based material, and they last for a long time, but then when they need to be repaired, they're very expensive. Asphalt streets are easier to repair, cost less in the short run, so I think this question of street longevity and material, ultimate material, is something we probably ought to be discussing at a committee level and come back to the council with. But then I'm also hearing that the concrete street reconstruction program, this is funded at $300,000 next year, isn't going to cover very much a year. And I find that a little bit frustrating. But when I look back at the street resurfacing program, we're about $250,000 short of what we're hoping to put in a year from now in that budget. So everything's kind of scaled back. I have a question, I think, for Alderman Bram, in that I didn't hear a motion coming out of his argument. And what I'd like to know is what you're proposing if you want to try to address concrete streets in the fiscal year that we're discussing. Where would you suggest we move the money from in order to put it into this budget, and how would that impact that program in the fiscal year going forward? So we've got two issues. We've got what's the right surface for the street, and if we chose to rebuild concrete streets, where does that money come from this year?
Again, I'll go to Alderman Brown if you would like to answer that, but let's keep in mind, you know, what type of surface we're going to, you know, use and all that fun stuff. We'll have to go through committee, our committee process system, and that should go through there and debated there, not here as we're budgeting. But Alderman Brown, if you'd like to answer where you're going to find the dollars, I'd be all yours.
I don't have actually much to comment on that. I would pose the same question on where did the funds come from the asphalt street resurfacing. I think part of the funds could come from reducing the sidewalk cost-sharing program back down to what it was proposed last fiscal year for this fiscal year. That's $100,000. I know from my own experience in the Public Works Committee that we have not spent every dollar that was allocated in the budget line items this fiscal year. So I think getting to the $300,000 that would be needed to at least restore back for this fiscal year is something that, you know, I don't know if I'm the right authority to stipulate where that comes from. Just like no alderman on this council has come up with the same rationale or same reasoning for every single line item here. within the capital expenditure budget. Because I could go through each one of these line items and ask where all those funds are coming from, but no alderman actually was the one who stated where the funds come from. So it's difficult from a layman's perspective, as a sitting alderman, a sitting elected official, to say where the funds are exactly coming from. I definitely have a portion, just by reducing what was currently allocated. I don't have all of the funds. I would look for the assistance from city staff to assist with that.
Very good. Would it be the will of the council then to just to move on with this item as is and see how dollars go, and if we can maneuver later on during the year?
I'd like to make a motion to add $300,000 for this fiscal year for the concrete street reconstruction.
Okay. We have a motion?
Question, Mr. Mayor.
Is it not a second, it's a question?
Question. From where?
I already responded to that statement already, so I don't have that answer.
All righty. Would you like to second that motion, Alderman Gutenkopf?
Yeah, I'm going to second it just because I hate to see a motion fail for a lack of second.
Okay, very good. Discussion. Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I made a comment a year ago when it came to budgets, and I'm going to repeat it again this year. I am certainly open to discussing and considering any change to the budget, any motion to the budget that's put forward. In this case, Alderman Bram's $300,000 into concrete street repair, but I am not comfortable with just putting on staff to say, come up with $300,000. I would need to know where that $300,000 is going to come from, because without that, it's going to come from the general fund, and we're going to spend money that we're trying to sock away. So without any sort of idea of where the money is going to come from in the budget, I don't see there's any way I can support the motion as is.
Very good. Anybody else? Discussion, questions? We could probably do this by voice vote, I would think. All in favor of Alderman Brahms' motion, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, say no.
No.
I think that motion fails, Alderman. It'll go in the budget as is. We appreciate the discussion, and we'll move on. I think that's all the circle backs. Is that right, City Manager Borcher?
That completes the list I had for circle backs, yes.
Okay, very good. So we'll instruct staff to proceed. Alderman Pezza, a question?
I have a question, but it wasn't a circle back. Was it still okay to, it's probably a question for either Director Gaston or Mr. Trozine.
Sure.
I know we touched on this last week, and everybody kind of said, okay, good idea, but I'm not sure, because I didn't see it referenced in any notes, if we need to take any action or how we should take action regarding the using the 1.2 to pay off the rest of that loan and keep that line open, and that whole thing about saving the interest by paying that off, that whole conversation we had. How will that be addressed or referenced, or do we need to take actual action on that, or is that just something that would happen?
I think was that relative to Lake and Walnut TIF district, that there was a placeholder for no.
It was a 2.1 million.
Oh.
Set aside in TIF fund, and the question that Alderman Pezza had, since that sale, that purchase isn't on the horizon at this moment, can we take that money and pay off part of our line of credit that also is in TIF 1? That line of credit was used for the purchase of the 242 North York building. And from my standpoint, yes, that can easily be done. I mean, it can be done tomorrow.
So does that need a motion, or is that just something? Again,
We're going to have multiple bites at the apple on this, so, you know, we can put that through the committee in the finance and let the finance committee actually determine whether that's the appropriate thing to do, and then we'll vote out of the council level after it goes out of committee. Director Gaston, does that sound appropriate?
That sounds fine. I can also, as it can be done tomorrow, but we also have a finance committee meeting on Monday night that we can discuss it there. If that chair would.
Chairman, what would you prefer?
I would prefer put it into committee just to stick with the procedures that we go through.
Okay.
It's only a week.
Yeah, it's a good idea. We'll put it through committee and.
Do I have to make a referral? Okay, we'll
No.
figure it out.
Technically, yeah, that, you know, actually Alderman Pezza, that would be great, a committee referral, just to, I would like to keep the procedures, you know, so a referral can be just one pager to Marilyn, and then we can get it out and put it on the agenda. That's pretty easy, and I think Bar, I'll have to look into it a little further, but I think it's a pretty good idea.
Thank you, Alderman. Very good. Anything else? Got all the circlebacks taken care of. Alderman Morley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this budget process has been very good, and I think one of the things the budget shows is that we're turning a corner, and we're very healthy. And I had a similar comment when I was talking about the assistant city manager. I want to be very cautious with what we're doing with the uptick that we have, both in the contribution we ask from our residents, but also the sales tax that's coming in. So I repeat, I want to be a little cautious about that. And I wanted to have this conversation. I think this is the appropriate time before the final budget gets approved. There's one thing in here that I'd like to draw some folks' attention to, and it has to do with our hiring. If you look at page 104 of our budget, this is a summary of some of our spend, specifically the ones I'm looking at are salaries, the top two lines, salaries and wages and employee benefits. So if you take a look at the third from the right, says estimated. That's where we think we're going to come in. Second from the right is what's proposed. Now some of the hires we have are halfway through the fiscal year, so in my opinion, to get a truer impact of what we're proposing, you have to jump out to the final column, which is 2012, 2013 proposed. So for this specific conversation, I'm comparing estimated, which I'll call column 1, to proposed, which is the far right column. And you'll note between salaries and wages and employee benefits, with some of our newfound money, we're increasing salaries and wages and employee benefits over the next year and a half, let's say, about $2.1 million. I think that's a pretty big commitment. Now, from what I've seen, we've had a lot of dark positions, positions that maybe have been budgeted but we've done without. I think the city staff has done a fantastic job of delivering city services while some of these positions have been held dark. And now this is our first year where we actually have a positive in cash flow and things are looking pretty good, and we're putting some of those numbers and some of those positions back in. And actually I agree with all of that. Here's the concern I have, and it simply relates to timing. Simply relates to timing. For the first time in 26 years, we're going to be getting a new city manager. I want to repeat that. City Manager Borchert has worked here for 40 years, and for the first time in 26 years, we're getting a new city manager. And we're going through that process right now. For a city manager to be around for 26 years to say it's a rarity is an understatement. It just doesn't happen. So we are faced with finding a CEO for our $120 million corporation. And it's a big undertaking. And here's the concern I have, is that we are going to be hiring in this budget, we're going to be green-lighting 5 new positions that were dark, and I'll draw the distinction. It's not a brand-new position like assistant city manager. We have a couple of police officers in there, we have a couple of IT folks in there, and some other stuff. In addition, I believe there's also dark positions that may have been carried over from the past couple of years as well. So my concern is that we are green-lighting and potentially hiring people before we hire a new city manager. And while I don't disagree with what the numbers are in the budget, and while I don't disagree with the employees that are proposed in the budget, I do have a concern that we're going to bring a new city manager in and he may have 4 or 5 new employees before he gets here. Or they might be in the budget and we might be in the process of hiring before that new city manager shows up, and that's a concern of mine. Because I think all of us are expecting something out of this new city manager. And I'm trying to figure out the best way to address this, because I certainly respect the current city manager and city staff and all of their recommendations for staffing. No question about it. If I didn't, I would have spoken up earlier and said, pull this out of the budget, pull that out of the budget. This is simply a timing discussion. And my concern is that we were making decisions on hiring when the CEO of our largest corporation, of our $110 million corporation, is walking out the door. So, therefore, I would like to make a motion, and I'm not sure if it goes in the budget or how it goes. I know this is a committee of the whole, so it's really just a recommendation to next week or the next council meeting. But I'd like to make a motion. The citywide hiring freeze be implemented immediately, only to be lifted with the consent of the council, with the exception of allowing for the hiring of 1 person for the IT department and 1 person for the police department. I believe there's enough evidence to show that those are critical, but that's my motion.
We have a second by Alderman Hipskin. Discussion? Alderman Gutenkopf, you have a discussion?
No, I wanted to second it. I agree.
Any other discussion? We've got a motion and a second to
Discussion?
Alderman Brown.
Yeah, and since these budget discussions sometimes last a little bit of time, what other positions would we be putting at hold if this motion goes forward? I think it's a good motion as long as I understand what motions we're actually holding off on other than the police and the 1 IT personnel. If City Manager Borcher could answer that.
City Manager Borch, would you like to answer, or actually would that be?
Yeah, I think we would, from a staff perspective, I would seek some clarity. I understand from a current dark positions, I think Alderman Morley is correct. There's going forward, at least, there is on a weekly, monthly basis. There's ins and out positions. But from a budget perspective, there were 2 police officers that were proposed to be budgeted next fiscal year that are currently dark, and the 2 IT positions that have been held off, actually in the budget but held off, were proposed to be filled. The zoning administrator, as discussed earlier, that was only for a 6-month period. Potentially, that would be held pursuant to the motion, allowing the manager to arrive to deal with that. My question would be, for clarity, firefighters for minimum manning, if there's a retirement, would a, well, I guess the motion says it's a hiring freeze subject to the city council's approval. So we would, understanding that, be my understanding that if the budget would be approved, we would proceed with hiring 1 police officer and 1 of the 2 IT positions, holding on the other positions until such time as the next manager was here to provide direction, thoughts, consideration for the council. And between now and then, if another position went dark, we'd bring it to the council's attention and say, 3 firefighters are gone, we need to replace them. Is that okay?
Alderman Morley, like to answer that question?
Yes, actually, and just to clarify, that's the reason why I worked on wording this motion and made it that simple. Certainly, and I don't want to pick on one person and say, well, okay, if this person leaves, because I don't want that person to leave. But absolutely, if if there's a retirement or whatever the circumstance is, then it's, as far as I'm concerned, the way I propose the motion, it's that simple. Just come back to city council and say, hey, 2 firemen retired.
Okay. Alderman Levin.
Well, I don't know that the city manager is going to hire a police officer or really have any input, and the council's giving direction that we're going to hire 2. And if the academy is going to start and we're going to need our 2 police officers, it doesn't seem like it makes sense to require the police chief to come through the existing city manager to ask for that. I could see if we were holding off hiring an assistant city manager, if we were hiring one, because, or a new police chief or something where the city manager is going to be directly supervising. But I think when the new city manager walks in the door, and by the time he or she figures out what's going on, a lot of these hiring decisions are going to need to be made. So I don't think the motion's really necessary. I don't find a strong objection to it, but these are not direct reports to the city manager. If the council's saying through the many hours we've spent deliberating that these are the appropriate positions to be hired, I don't know why we need to have a hiring freeze when the city manager is probably not going to be making the decisions, at least on police and fire.
Alderman Pezza.
Thank you, Mayor. Alderman Morley actually beat me to the punch and said it in much fewer words than I had planned, but I agree wholeheartedly. And, you read all over the headlines, that's what many, many communities are doing. And I think with a budget of this size, I think we owe it to the community to let them know that we are going to look at this seriously, and it's not just going to be, I don't want to call it a free-for-all, but that there will be some parameters, and that this will be looked at, and it will be taken seriously. And I third your motion.
Alderman Gutenkopf, and I go to Alderman Brown.
Yeah, I guess my question is for the city manager. Are we sure that this is it in terms of dark positions, 2 police, 2 IT, and the zoning administrator? Isn't there already some motion in the works to get the part-time educator at the museum also on the list?
City Manager Borcher, would you like to respond to that, or?
I don't recall the specifics of the, Marilyn's going to help, which I'm looking for. Thank you.
In regards to the question about the part-time person at the museum, yes, that one is in the works, but that is being 100% funded by the foundation.
Thank you. Okay, so that wouldn't be affected by this.
It would not be affected as its own separate funds.
Assistant City Manager Cap, you have a...
Also a part-time IT and an IT intern in process right now. So those are dark right now.
Okay.
We're trying to fill as well positions left. There's some
Alderman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now that I've heard the number of dark positions, as you all know, last week I had concern with moving forward with the 2 full-time proposed in this budget for IT. I'm definitely 100% for the 1 full-time position immediately. With the additional information that we received from the city staff on the study that was done, I still have concerns moving forward with the IT. So I agree with Alderman Morley's proposal on that aspect, as well as the zoning administrator aspect. I'm a little bit concerned with, and if Alderman Morley would like to speak to it, in regards to why we're restricting the officers from 2 down to 1. When it comes to safety, I think that I would actually like to move forward and not put any handcuffs, or no pun intended, on the officers, on the police department, of moving forward with the 2 open positions. Alderman Levin's comments are good ones. When it comes to training the officers, we don't want them to be missing the police academy and being delayed even further. So if you would like to, if you care to share your insight on the reason why you're proposing from 2 to 1, I'd appreciate it.
I'm going to go to Alderman Healy, and then I can let Alderman Morley maybe answer that question if he'd like to, so.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think, first, a suggestion, and then my main point. The suggestion would be that should this motion pass, I think it probably would be a good idea that city staff present to council at the next meeting all of the in-flight positions, just so that there's no confusion as to whether it violated this motion or not, just so that, you know, we're all clear and we know exactly what's going on. So that's just a suggestion I'd make should the motion pass. Secondly, and mainly in regards to the motion, I'm not going to speak for Alderman Morley, and I'm not going to try to answer Alderman Bram's question directly. However, I think the flexibility in the motion, if I understand it correctly, that if Chief Neubauer says, I really need to have 2 police officers and here's why, one's already approved via the motion, he could come back very quickly and say, here's why I need the second one, a lot of which I've already presented to you, yes or no, and then we have the say. I don't see this as really slowing us down much. But at a larger level, and Alderman Pezza mentioned it earlier tonight about, you know, the little bit more of revenue. And I agree with that. It's not easy raising taxes or raising fees. But on the other hand, it's not easy to cut. As evidenced by this budget, we've really only cut, that I can recollect, 2 things. The assistant city manager job, and then some rent from the historical museum, which, by the way, Alderman Pezza was you know, big on back when the rates were being negotiated. It's tough to cut. So, you know, we're kind of in between that rock and a hard place. It's tough to raise revenues, and we do our best, but it's tough to make cuts. What I like about this motion is it allows us the flexibility and the ability to have that final say, because we're the ultimate authority, if you will. We're the ones that have to answer to the public, so this gives us that final yes, no, until our revenue streams, non-taxes, whether it's sales tax or what have you, are really firmed up, and we're really comfortable with the direction the revenue streams are going. But it also just gives us one final say to say, yeah, that makes total sense. It's in the budget, makes sense, let's move forward. I don't see how that's a bad thing, so I think it's wise, and I'm in full support. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Levin?
You know, I think Alderman Pezza's comment made it a little clearer. I thought your objection or the purpose of your motion was to wait till the new city manager got here to be involved in making the hiring decisions. I think Alderman Pezza's comment is sort of putting an extra gate before the hires occur. When we added the 2 police officers to the budget, I asked the question, do we get another say at this, or is this automatic? And the response was, if we put it in the budget, it means that we've decided, at least on the police side, that we're ready to go. So I think I would move to amend your motion to, because I think if we've already decided that the police officers are the priority and that they're going to, I think Chief Neubauer said it would take 6 months to get them into the academy, to get them trained and get them on the street. If it's the council's decision to hire those 2 police officers, I would support the motion, but I would amend it to exempt the 2 police officers instead of 1 police officer.
Okay.
A point of order, was
Yes.
that a motion?
Yes. It was a motion, so Alderman Bram with a second, okay? Any discussion? Alderman Leader.
As I understand it, Alderman Morley is saying, and as I understood Alderman Healy, that there's a good deal of flexibility built in here, so that if Chief Neubauer said, I need the second position opened up, I have to move forward, that would happen under the flexible motion that Alderman Morley is making. So I would like to ask Alderman Morley if I understand him correctly.
Alderman Morley.
Thank you. Yes. That's pretty succinct. I felt we needed to draw the line somewhere. I do believe that we do need to hire at the very least one police officer and one IT person. This is just the beginning of a process. Like I said, this is more of a pause button. This is our first year since I've been here in 4 years of having more money to play with at the end of the year than we did the year before. And that combined with the fact that we're going to be having a new city manager very shortly, the correlation wasn't going to be drawn between the city manager actually interviewing the police officer. But the city manager's coming in and philosophically might want to run all departments in a different manner. And what I don't want to do is slot in folks in areas where there might be a drastic change in that department. There might be 3 people move from here to over there. And I think that, you know, it's just taking a breather until the new guy shows up and says, okay, I see what they're asking for, and I agree, or I would like to change a couple of things here and there. In addition, back to the last speaker's comment, yes, this motion allows for that. Come back next week, come back the following week and say, this is why I need 2 other people. But I know this is a big conversation to have. I did not want to have this conversation after Marilyn Gaston and, you know, City Attorney Storino had wrapped it all up in a neat bow and throw this codicil on top of it. So I would say that I disagree with the amendment. I think there's the flexibility in the original motion that allows for it, and I just want to be cautious and hire slowly now that we got this money.
Okay, all right. Alderman Levin, real quick.
I'm trying to understand what you're trying to achieve by your motion, because are you really trying to achieve a hiring freeze so that the council approves on a case-by-case basis the hiring of new employees, or are you trying to stay it until a new city manager comes on the scene? Because the rationale you've explained doesn't really matter whether it's the old, I mean, it seems that part of what you said would go all the way through the fiscal year.
Alderman Morley.
I hope I'm not overcomplicating things. The main portion of the motion, the main drive behind the motion is we're going to have a new guy steering the ship. And I want to hold off on as much hiring as possible until that guy's in. The release valve is, hey, if we really need somebody, as City Manager Borchert said, hey, 2 firemen retire. That's the release valve. Come back and say we need these folks. But in terms of filling dark positions, and I had spoken to City Manager Borchert about this earlier, city staff is a victim of their own success. They have done a fantastic job over the past 6 to 8 years under this incredible budget crunch to keep city services as high as they are while keeping these positions dark. And I give them all the credit in the world for that. All I'm asking to do is before they fill those positions, let's get the new guy in. And the coming back, I am not interested in every single position being filled, run through this council from now until the end of time. This is a short amount of time until the head guy comes in. And then the other part, like I said, it's just simply the out clause or the release valve if we're faced with that.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman York.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, I support the original motion. I understand Alderman Levin's motion. But first of all and foremost, I'd like to say, this budget overall is very pleasing. It accomplishes a lot of things I think that have been near and dear to me, and that's building the fund balances. To be able to look at it and say we're putting $200,000, in essence $200,000 into our working cash fund this year, and then continuing that for the next 4 years to replenish that fund, as well as making a planned contribution of somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.6 million at the end of the 12 fiscal year, and seeing that obviously our estimated expenses are running less than what the budget was, so we're going to see a contribution to the general fund balance this year. These are all very positive things and reflect very well on our staff and the people who are managing the day-to-day operations of the city. So I agree with Alderman Morley in the fact that it's not a reflection on that there have been bad decisions being made, but that we're at an entirely new time in city history. I don't know if you can beat a new time in history, but You'll have to go with me now because it's 10:30 and I'm not thinking exactly clearly, but this is an important time, and I firmly believe, too, while we may need these positions, I think we owe it to Mr. Borchert's successor to give that person the opportunity to understand the structure of the city, to meet with the department heads, and to really have a say in who's in the city providing services for the residents and the constituents and the taxpayers. In the meantime, I fully believe that the motion made by Alderman Morley gives us the simple flexibility that we need to address important issues as they come up between today and when that person is in the office and has a clear understanding of the landscape of the city. So I will support his motion 100%. And again, congratulations to the staff and everybody on a wonderful budget. Thank you.
Very good. City Manager Borchert.
Not to belabor any of the points, I appreciate the positive comments and frankly maybe agree that we're a victim of our efforts on behalf of fulfilling your expectations of budget and service delivery. Relative from a staffing perspective, and point out the community sets the direction and the council sets the goal and the staff tries to follow that. Staffing has been held back by the plan, and we're together on that and share that relative to a target and an objective and a plan. With the positions filled, I would remind the council, we went through it early on with the budget review. The staffing level is at a staffing level that was in effect back in 1996, or 16 years ago, even with those positions all filled. So we're certainly as a staff understanding of the implications of a full-time employee relative to the budget, and where appropriate, sliding to contractual services as opposed to in-house services. Relative to the motion, as you wish, we'll follow through, but to do justice to the chief of police, he has been very aggressive at cost containment and effective delivery of the resources available to him to provide services. The budget actually provides that of the positions that were vacant, that 2 would be filled beginning at the beginning of, as Alderman Levin suggests appropriate, the beginning of the police academy, which I think is 2 months into the fiscal year. So May, June, sometime around July 1st, those positions would be filled if approved by the council, because that's as soon as that individual would be able to start at the academy. The academy is several months long. Upon successful graduation, there's an extensive field training process before that individual is actually an independent performing police officer. Lots of details that go well beyond what I can summarize today. I would like the P&S committee to take a look at that perhaps Monday night at the next committee meeting, so there's a committee council understanding of implications and ramifications of only going forward with one, in that second one doesn't become a possibility for several months down the road. And I do appreciate the position of the next city manager. I think is still going to need to deliver police protection to the community with the same police office staff, and these staffing levels, I think, are appropriate.
Very good. Alderman Bram, and I'll go to Alderman Pezza.
Thank you. Thank you. In regards to Alderman Levin's amendment and my second, I think that Chief Neubauer came here during our budget discussions and stated his rationale, and I don't want to trivialize that, on why we should move forward with the positions that were proposed in the budget. I applaud Alderman Morley. I think it's along the same lines that I was attempting to go a week ago on his current motion this evening. but safety is number one. And I think Chief Neubauer, stated his case very well last week, or however many weeks ago it was when he spoke to his budget items. And I'd prefer not to have him, trying to think of a good way to phrase it, jump through hoops or go back and resubmit his justifications when I think he did a good job and justified the staffing positions that he requested in this year's budget. In all honesty, I'm in favor of either of these, the amendment or the original motion. I'd strongly prefer the original motion because I would like to give Chief Neubauer the approval that he sought during the original budget discussions to move forward with it whenever he feels it is necessary. Crime, safety, what have you, is very important, and I would encourage everybody to vote for the amended motion.
Alderman Pezza.
Just a clarification, if Alderman Morley's motion passed, and Chief Neubauer came to us next week, or our next council meeting, and had on the agenda, he wanted to hire a position, and then we voted yes, is that how that would work? Would it be that simple?
City Attorney Storino, would that have to go through a report and an ordinance, or how would that work out?
I think under the way it was...
Or resolution?
I think under the way it was proposed by Alderman Morley, the council could take it up, could take up that, under, as he puts it, the relief valve.
But would it have to go through a cycle?
No.
Or can we just say it, we want to add a police
You'd
officer?
be releasing your own self-imposed
right.
moratorium, so I think it could just proceed.
So we could act on it pretty quickly.
Could be
That's
a
my...
report, or could simply be a motion of the council, but the council would have to approve it.
The council would have to deal with it, is what City Manager Borchert is saying, and I agree with that, and I think it could just come before the council at the next available council meeting.
Okay.
Alderman Levin.
I hate to even comment again, but I'm only trying to respond to what the chief already told us, which is, if I have a feeling he'll come into the very next meeting and say that to get into the academy schedule, you have to have the test. Someone's hired, they got to pass, be on board and told they're heading off to the academy, and if it's a June or July date, the fiscal year starts May 1st. So,
in fairness to both motions, they're almost identical except one is a policeman. So, Alderman Morley?
Certainly don't want to turn this into an anti-police vote, but I did hear, Alderman, I made that mistake 2 weeks in a row now. I did hear City Manager Borchert say that there's plenty of time between now and the academy to get it done. If we went forward with the original motion, there's plenty of time to add that person before the academy starts. And I wouldn't necessarily call it jumping through hoops. And again, I think we're focusing on the release valve more than we are on the main motion itself. But if training costs $100,000 per cadet, and they have a minimum starting salary of $60,000, and they've got insurance and pension, then maybe I do want the chief to come back and explain why we're spending $200,000 for the next 20 years. So, again, I'll say back to my original motion, I tried to make it, I don't know, programmers call it as elegant as possible, as succinct and simple as possible, because they really didn't want to get into a specific employment debate on every single issue. I do think there's a need, an immediate need for at least one police officer, and there's the option to add that second police officer. And I heard from City Manager Borchert that after this fiscal year starts, it's 2 full months before we put someone into the academy. So I think there's time. So I would not support the amended motion.
Okay. Anybody else? Go ahead and put this to a vote, I think. Vote will be on the amended motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, say no.
No.
No. I would say, in opinion of the chair, that motion would fail. We'll go back to the original motion. Alderman Morley's motion. We'll do that by voice vote as well. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed, say no. The motion passes.
Okay. All right. I think we've got everything covered. I think we have the direction to give the staff and the city attorney to put this budget into votable form, which we'll be looking at our next council meeting. And Marilyn Gaston, Finance Director Gaston, City Attorney Storino, City Manager Borchard, all the assistants, Mr. Trezine, Assistant City Manager Cobb, Director Hughes, we thank you for all your hard work, and we look forward to putting this to bed here at our next meeting. So, need a motion to adjourn. Oh, I'm sorry. City Manager Borchard.
What staff will complete now, per your approval to go forward, will be the budget as revised, and I will certainly will work with the staff relative to the controls on staffing going forward, work with you in that regard. There is at this time of the year always what's called that reappropriation, those items that have been previously budgeted and approved and council approved for implementation, but not all the dollars will be expended in this fiscal year. Those areas that will require some dollars from this year to be paid for next year will be listed and included in the new budget in that they will be reappropriated. But there will be a clear listing of all those items in a memorandum from the finance staff to you, accompanying the budget ordinance that Mr. Storino's office will be prepared for the council meeting 2 weeks from tonight.
And I echo Alderman York's compliments. It's a much better budget that we're looking at today than we looked at the last year and previous council looked at the year before. So, we've turned the corner and steady as she goes, so to speak, and we're going to get through this recession, put money in the bank, and get back to normal here and still deliver the quality services that we expect, and get those fund balances built up as well too. So, with that, motion to adjourn. Alderman Morley, second by Alderman Hipskin. All in favor, say aye. Aye. We're adjourned.